السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
وعليكم السلام.
Hey guys, inshallah, I hope you're all well.
Alhamdulillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We start off with Fiqh. We carry on from where we left off yesterday. Let's do a little bit of revision. Sheikh Umar al-Madani, which chapter did we start off yesterday? Which bab? Umar?
I forgot. But I remember it was about Nisab.
طيب. عالم غير.
شيخ بيستعر بهيمة الأنعام.
بهيمة الأنعام. What are بهيمة الأنعام?
That's camel, cow, and goat or sheep.
أحسنت. طيب. We said that there's some encompassing rules when it comes to this. So, in other words, who will pay zakah when it comes to this chapter? Let's say somebody has a farm and they have animals and they come and ask you. Naeem, I asked you yesterday, so let me ask Ibrahim. Somebody has a farm and they have animals there, a rancher. They say, do I pay zakah or I don't pay zakah? What's the first question you ask him?
You ask them if they produce milk.
Yes, so you ask him, what reason are you keeping these animals for? If he's keeping these animals just for transporting stuff or for working in the fields, then there's no zakah on them. But if he's keeping them for their milk as well as for them increasing, reproducing, then we ask him a second question. What's the second question we ask him? Omar from India.
We ask him that if he gives them the food or they graze from by nature.
Ahsan, طيب. Naeem, if he says that I feed them for 7 months in the year, and as for the other 5 months, they eat from the wild, from what Allah has provided. What do you tell him?
He do not have to pay zakah then, because he feed them more.
Oh, because he's feeding them either half the year or more than half the year or all of it. Okay.
All of it.
Ahsant. After we agree on that, then we said that when it comes to the nisab of camels, where did we start? What did we say? Who can give me the first threshold? Who's here? I asked to Omar, Ibrahim, Alam Gheer, another Omar. Amira, do you want to try? Not yet. طيب. Omar. طيب. Amira says 5 to 9. Okay, well, what do we do with those who are from 1 to 4? Let's say somebody has 4 camels. Do they pay zakah or they don't pay zakah? Alam Gheer.
Up to 4, there's no zakah.
So we said from 1, sorry, I'm writing in Arabic. 1 to 4. And we say here he has 1 to 4 camels, he doesn't pay zakah, okay? Put an X there. Right, if he has from 5 up to 9, how many does he pay? Umar al-Madani. How many camels does he give?
One camel?
He gives 1 camel which is 3 years old or 4 years old?
More than
Or 5 years
just one.
old? Just 1 camel. Ibrahim,
One camel, yeah.
5 to 9. Ibrahim?
5 to 9 is 1 sheep.
1 sheep. Okay, here, yesterday we only took sheep. We didn't take camels. So a person here should pay a sheep, which is shah. This is 1 shah. Shah is a sheep. And from 10 up to 14, Naeem, since you're back, what does a person give if he has 10 up to 14 camels?
Yeah, it's two sheep for zakat, Sheikh.
2 sheep, okay. And then 15 up to 19?
3 sheep, Sheikh.
15 up to 19, we said 3 sheep. So here is camels, he's got camels, but he's giving his zakah in sheep. There's a 3. Instead of writing Shah again, we'll just put that. Okay. And the last threshold, Omar from India.
Up to 24, it's 4 sheep.
So 20 to 24.
20 to 24. Yeah.
Okay, he gives 4 sheep. The reason why we're taking it slowly, especially when it comes to camels, is because it changes. There's quite a lot of explanation. So inshallah, today we'll take the second part of it. So far what we've taken 24 and under. Okay, so I'm going to put a line here. And we said that if a person has less than 4, they don't pay zakah. And if they have anything from 4 up to 24, they pay in sheep. So look at this. All that is sheep, either 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. Now, if we come to the next fard, or the next threshold, is from 25 up to 35. 25 25 إلى 35. Here now he starts paying his zakah in camels. Okay, so the minute you reach this threshold, now your zakah is going to be in camels if a person has camels. What does he have to give here? They say bintu makhad. Bint, referring to the camel he's giving, should be feminine. How old should it be? They said makhad. Makhad is a camel that's 1 year old and it's already started in its second. So i.e. 1 year has passed and it hasn't yet reached the age of 2. Okay, why they call it bintu makhad? Because they say that generally the mother of this camel would be ready to give birth again. Okay, they have their names. Some they name according to the teeth, some they name according to the mother, whether it has milk or not, etc. But I'll get you all the detail there, inshallah. So here, if you look from 25 to 35, you've got bintu makhad. That's one female camel, which is from the age of 1 up to 2, not over 2. Okay, then from 36 up to 45. You give what's called bintu labun. Bintu labun. Okay. Bintu labun, because generally this camel, its mother would have given birth and is already suckling a child. She has milk. So bintu labun is 2 years old. Let me write this here. So that's between the age of 1 and 2, so not 2 and greater. And this, when you read the books of fiqh, they'll just tell you it's 1 year old and it started its second year. That's how they write it. In English, to make it simple, we'll just say it's 1 year and above, but not more than 2. And this one is already past 2 years of its life. So that's 2 years old, bintu labun. And then from 46 camels up to 60, up to 60 camels. Here they'll give what's called hiqqah. Hiqqah is one that's already 3 years old. Okay. Here when they speak about these, they say وَدَخَلَتْ فِي الثَّانِيَةِ وَدَخَلَتْ فِي الثَّالِثَةِ وَدَخَلَتْ فِي الرَّابِعَةِ. So 1 year has to have passed. So if somebody wants to give a camel of his that's a female, and he has to pay, let's say, 1 camel here, and he says, okay, I'm giving my camel that's 11 months old, we'll say no, 1 year has to have passed. Bintu makhad, bintu labun, and then hiqqah from 46 to 60. And then here you've got from 61, and you count 15, so that's 75. You give what's called a jada'ah. Jada'ah is named according to its teeth. Some say the milk teeth start to drop out. Jada'ah, type of camel. A camel that's 4 years old. Now, what I told you yesterday is the older the camel gets, the more value it has. And if you notice, if you notice, the more camels a person has, can you see they have to give a higher value camel? And notice how when we were speaking about these went up in multiples of 5, or roughly 5 extra. So 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, 20 to 24. Then these next two, they go up in 10. Let me put that in a different color. They go up in 10. So 25 to 35, if you really had to count 25, 26, it will be 11, but just say roughly 10. And then these next two, they go up in multiples of 15. So here we'll put 10. And here we'll put 15. That's 15 in Arabic. So what do you notice? Slowly we're building up and we're taking how many camels a person pay. Then you'll find that at roughly 120, it starts to balance out. Then you generally have a pattern. So to recap what we've taken so far, and all this, you learn it slowly, and then you're able to take it all. 1 to 4, no zakah. Person has camels. 5 to 9, 1 sheep. 10 to 14, 2 sheep. 15 to 19, 3 sheep. 20 to 24, 4 sheep. 25 to 35, now he's starting to pay in camels. So here's a line you can put a line here. This is where the thresholds are changing again. 25 to 35, bintu makhad. So 1 year old, it's already started 2nd year of life. And then 36 to 45, bintu labun, 2 years and older. 46 to 60, hiqqah, which is 3 years old. And 61 to 75 is jada'ah. And inshallah tomorrow we'll take from 76 to 91, and from 76 to 90, sorry, and then 91 to 120, inshallah. And then after that, you'll find after 120, you have a general pattern. So this will take you about 4 lessons. So hopefully by the end of the week, you would have covered zakatul ibil, whatever you have to give when a person has camels. And generally, you'll find roughly from 1 camel all the way to 120. Generally, all the madhahib are in agreement. After 120, you find the Hanafi madhab has their own way of doing it, whereas the others have a slightly different way. Any questions with what we've taken?
For the hiqqah and the jara'ah.
Jada'ah. Sorry, I'm writing on a trackpad, but I'll send it to you, inshallah. So you got bintu makhad, because they say that the mother is more likely to be holding a child from Makhid, naming after the mother. Then bintu labun is 2 years old. You've just got to remember the years here. Hiqqah, 3 years old, and jada'ah. Jada'ah. Jim, dhal, ain, and around ta or ha. Yeah, so you were saying?
So they have to be the hiqqah and jaza'ah has to be a female too.
Yes. All this what we're talking about are female. Look, bint, and then you got a ta marbuta, which shows a bint, which means it's a female, and here jada'ah. Why? As I told you yesterday, that in the animals, the females give milk and they give birth. Hence, their value is always more. Now, what happens if a person, let's say, has a male of it? Inshallah, those masail will come. So let's say he has what's called an ibnu labun. So let's say compulsory upon him. I'll just give it to you this masala in brief. Let's say a person has 30 camels. What do they have to pay? They have to pay bintu makhab. Okay, female camel, that's 1 year old, right? Now, let's say he doesn't have that, and he's got male camels, then he must give a year older. So if he can't give this as a female, then he gives ibnu labun, and they'll mention it, inshallah. We'll get there. Also, sometimes what happens is, let's say the person is supposed to give bintu makhad, but he's only got bintu labun, which is higher in value. Then if he gives this, the person collecting the zakah on behalf of Islamic government, for example, then they have to recompense him with something. And the opposite is also true. Let's say he's supposed to give bintu labun and he's only got bintu makhad, then he gives this with something extra. Any other question? No question, or can I ask? Yeah.
I was gonna ask him if you're not in an Islamic government, how would you give the camels and like a llama, for example?
Okay, so llamas, I don't think there's zakah on those because they don't fall into this bracket. Llama, you're talking about that animal which has like a long neck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, what do they call them also? Or is alpaca the same thing or no?
Yeah, they're related, something like that.
Wallahu alam, I don't know. I don't think there's zakah on those. I don't know if any, well, I haven't seen if there is zakah on those. Wallahu alam, but I don't think so because generally when you're speaking about, you can't class that as a camel. I don't think so. And it's not a sheep either. So what would it be? And you got a rule of thumb in the Sharia. Some people say whatever has وما سكت عنه فهو رحمة لكم غير نسيان. Whatever Allah kept quiet about, meaning He didn't tell you, then it's something forgiven. It's not out of forgetfulness. And sometimes there's people who try to derive a ruling. But we did mention that when it comes to the camels, whether it's the Arabian camel or the one that's not the Arabian camel has one hump. The others, they have two humps. They call, in the books of fiqh, they say al-bukht wal-irab. And they say wal-bukht wal-irabu sawa, which means whether you have a camel with one hump or two humps, you pay this zakah. And when they speak about cows, they speak about normal cows. We have as well as what they call a jamus. Jamus is like a domestic buffalo. It's a type of cow, not the wild buffaloes that we have in Africa, no. And then when they speak about sheep, what's also included is goats. Goats, the ones with the hair, and sheep, the ones with the wool. Interesting. You must find out if anybody ever said there's zakah on those. Inshallah, if I remember, I'll also check. Any other question with regards to what we've taken?
We're taking the example of the camels, and this is the same case with the cows, right?
No,
Meaning
this is not the nisab of cows. Huh?
Okay.
The nisab of cows is different. The threshold of cows is different. The threshold of sheep are different. And then what also comes is if people are partners. So the mas'ala of khultah, they say, let's say you've got two partners. One has 20 camels and the other has 20 camels. What threshold will they pay? We look at whether they're being kept in one place or are there many different farms across different countries. Do we join? Do we not join? Because at times when you join, you could pay less zakah or you could pay more zakah. So those are all masail that come in khultah. Anything else? Right, let me ask. Naeem, ask you a question. I want you to think. So far,
sure.
we've taken zakah on livestock.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there so much? Have you done farming before or no?
No, Sheikh.
No. Okay. Why is it that in the Arabian Peninsula, or even when you look at the nusus, you find nusus meaning the Quran as well as the Sunnah, you find
Sheikh,
that this.
just give me 1 second. My father's just calling me. 1 second.
No problem. Okay, carry on. Ask somebody else. Alam Gheer, what do you think? Why do you think there's so much emphasis put on the camel as opposed to the cow, for example? A lot of times you find the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were riding camels. And a lot of times you find when they wanted milk, it's mentioned they got from the sheep. Why not from cows?
Sheikh, I think, in my opinion, in the Arabian Peninsula, I think the weather is not suitable for cows. It's only camels, and so camel is a very precious animal, domestic animal for the desert.
So well done. Your camel doesn't need to eat as much as a cow. Cows need to graze a lot. And that's why you find that there's till today, okay, now because of dairy and that, they have some cows there, but you find the camels are able to bear the desert as well as the cold. And one of the names of a camel is Safinatul Sahra, which is the ship of the desert. And look, it's amazing. That's why Allah says, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Do they not look at the camel, just how it's created? Some people mention that the camel has 3 layers or 3 eyelids. It's mentioned. I don't know how authentic or true it is, but you can see that when it comes to the terrain, there's a sandstorm, there's a dust storm, and you can't see far that camel is able to walk. You find through the softest of sand, where it's difficult for us to walk, the camel is able to walk. You find through the rockiest of terrain, it's able to move. You find when it comes to it storing water, Allah created it such that it stores water. When it comes to it being able to carry goods and transport people from place to place, it's able to do that. And that's from the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. I think we'll stop there. And then tomorrow we'll take the next threshold. And then there's one more to take. So hopefully on Friday, we would have finished camels. And then cows are quite straightforward. And after that, goats are straightforward as well. Then we'll go on to farming crops as well as foodstuffs. Then we'll get into gold and silver and stock, inshallah. Right, today we said that we'll do Mustalah al-Hadith. Okay.
I have a question. Sorry. So you mentioned how if you have a higher value than what is due on you, the government owes you.
Yeah. You had mentioned an interesting question. You said, what do people do? I think along the lines, either you mentioned, someone else mentioned, what do you do today if there's no Islamic government to come and collect your zakah? And that we'll take it, inshallah. Sometimes you have Islamic organizations that take these, like where we are. You could probably donate goats to, I wouldn't say donate, you could give your zakah and goats to them or cows to them. But there's another mas'ala that comes up is, are you allowed to pay the value of that animal or not? And generally you find the Hanafis lean more towards paying the value of stuff. Even when it comes to Sadaqatul Fitr or Zakatul Fitr, inshallah, we'll get to that. You can see my screen or you can't see my screen?
But if you owe like 70, but your camels are all like below 2.
We'll get there, inshallah. We'll get there. So generally you find what they give you at the beginning of fiqh is the rule. The rule is like this in anything. So you learn the rule. And after that, they give you exceptions to the rule. Okay, so what happens? The guy is supposed to pay this, but he doesn't have this. Okay, do this. What happens if this is supposed to happen, but they don't have? And generally, that's how you should learn fiqh, where you learn what's agreed upon, you learn the principles, instead of going to, okay, but what if this didn't happen? And they'll get to it. You might understand it, but maybe somebody else, they'll say, okay, you're mixing me up because you're jumping from mas'ala to mas'ala. And generally, you find that's why the scholars have written their books such that they make sense when it comes to you looking at it. So you go from this mas'ala, okay, so it only makes common sense to then go to this one. Also, they go according to the ahadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well as the ayat. So you find there's a hadith where, example, a hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, where it says that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu wrote to him that this was faridatul sadaqah, what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decreed when it came to sadaqah. And then he mentions the rules, and then at the end, exceptions to the rules, and inshallah, we'll take that. طيب. Inshallah, today we're starting a new subject and we'll take it on Wednesday. The subject is called Mustalah al-Hadith. What's Mustalah al-Hadith? In brief, it's where people look at the chain of narrators when it comes to the hadith and when it comes to the matan of the hadith. The matan of the hadith is the actual hadith. Now, there's 2 ways of looking at these ahadith. Either you're looking at what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Is it something from his saying, or is it an action, or was it a habit of his? For example, you're trying to derive benefit. That's one way of looking at it. The other way, which Mustalah is generally the topic, is you're looking at the chain of narrators. Is this hadith authentic or it's not authentic? What makes a hadith authentic? Okay, what happens if we've got a few guys who narrate the same hadith, but let's say, and you can tell because of their chain of narrations that they take from the same sheikh, but from 10 amongst them, you've got 9 who narrate the hadith one way, and the 10th guy says, no, it's different. For example, there's one hadith where the 7 who will be shaded on the day of Qiyamah, وَرَجُلٌ تَصَدَّقَ بِصَدَقَةٍ فَأَخْفَاهَا, a man who gave sadaqah and he hid it such that his left hand doesn't know what the right hand spent. And that's the general riwayah of the hadith. And you find that there's 1 or 2 who narrated it the opposite way around. They said, and the right hand doesn't know what the left hand spent. So inshallah, we'll get into all of that. What do you do with that type of difference? How do you look at it? How do you reconcile between that? Another thing, what makes the hadith authentic? And then when you go to these shurut of sihha, are they agreed upon? What's the detail when it comes to them? So generally, the ulama, when they wrote in these sciences, a lot of them wrote a lot of detail, explanation, and then what they did is they summarized to make it easy for us who are starting out to memorize their works, to understand their works, to get our foot into the door, so to say. And then after that, you understand, your understanding for the subject gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're able to look and differentiate a little bit more. So inshallah, we'll start off with a book called Al-Bayquniyah. It's actually written in poetry form. And this book, or this is called a matan. So a matan is when the scholars would summarize or write in some science or piece of knowledge, they would shorten it and make it palatable, memorizable, so that a student of knowledge can memorize, understand, and have the rules with him wherever he goes. And I would encourage you guys to memorize. Obviously, you start off with the Quran, and then you start off with the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You start off with any good matan. So if you have what's called a matan in fiqh, for example, right now we're taking a lot of masail from the Hanafi madhab. You've got Quduri and others. When you've got Nahu, you've got Al-Ajurrumiyah, Alfiyat ibn Malik. When you've got Mustalah al-Hadith, for example, you've got Al-Bayquniyah, Nukhbatul Fiqh. When you've got other sciences, every single science has a matan to get you started with it. If you're able to memorize, all the better, and understand. If you're unable to memorize, then read this many times until you know it, because this is like your, these days when those people who sell courses, they say, get my cheat sheet, literally, i.e. we've summarized it and we've made it so easy for you. So this is your cheat sheet to having this knowledge with you all the time. You memorize it because it's just full of rules and benefits, and then you take it from there. Inshallah, today we'll be taking, or we'll be starting off with Mustalah al-Hadith. This is called Manzumatul Bayquniyah. Manzuma is referring to poetry. And come here. This here's the author. كان رحمه الله حيا قبل سنة 1065. Now, when it comes to the author's name, the scholars differ as to what was his name. Why? Because he wasn't that famous. So here it's written Umar ibn Muhammad ibn Futuh al-Bayquni. When was he born? When did he die? Wallahu a'lam. They don't really know, but they know he lived roughly around that time. Those days there were no passports and IDs and a database of everybody. Adadul Abiyat, how many couplets of shi'r, of poetry? 34. What I want to get at is, if you look at this man who's written Manzumatul Bayquni, they are differing as to what exactly his name is. They're not quite sure when he was born. They're not quite sure when he passed away. But what we do know for certain is that he wrote a piece of knowledge, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted it acceptance. And this is a lesson we all take. At times, you may not be known amongst your people But the fact that you are sincere, the fact that you ask Allah to grant you goodness and acceptance and make you from those whom He's pleased with, inshallah, you find that your knowledge will spread, and at times Allah chooses others to spread this knowledge. Also, look at how what's benefiting him today. We don't know when was he born, when did he pass away, how many children he had, whether he was rich or poor, etc. But what we do know is he left beneficial knowledge with us, and that's why I always encourage the students, you guys also, that one of the best acts of worship that you can do, especially in the time we're living in today, is to seek knowledge, practice upon it, and spread it. Because if you look at wealth, your wealth comes and goes. And even if a person leaves a sadaqah jariyah, generally, most of these sadaqat that are jariyah, a lot of them don't carry on past the lifespan of the person who put it, or maybe his children and his children's children, roughly to about 2 or 3 generations, and that's about it. Your pious child that is able to benefit you after you pass away, you're not guaranteed that either. But what you're more likely to be guaranteed is beneficial knowledge you taught people. Anybody. This could be a small hadith. The Messenger ﷺ says, "Ballighu anni walau ayah." Convey from what I've taught or what I've given, even if it's 1 ayah. So I encourage you guys to learn and to benefit others. Inshallah, we start off. I'm going to explain to you briefly. All I want you guys to do is to get a gist of, when we're speaking about authentic, what exactly are we talking about? Are there conditions for it? When we're speaking about Hasan, are there conditions for it? What are we talking about? Okay, there's different types of hadith when it comes to da'if, weak hadith. Are they all the same? Or is da'if in and amongst itself different levels and different categories? So when you get that, you're able to start understanding. For example, you're reading a book of fiqh, and Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, for example, in Bulugh al-Maram, he tells you, وَضَعَّفَهُ فُلَانَ, and this hadith, this person said it's weak. Or وَأَعَلَّهُ فُلَانَ, and this person said there's a illah in it, etc. So right now you're getting just familiar. Inshallah, you get into details afterwards. So we start off. I'm going to translate for you. I'll read, translate, and give you the gist of what they're saying. And slowly, don't worry if you don't get it the first time. If you feel like it's extremely confusing, you will get it. Just be patient. So the author starts off, obviously, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the name of Allah, the most merciful. He himself is merciful. His mercy reaches the creation. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It says, Abda'u. What's Abda'u? Abda'u means I start. So what's he starting off with? Abda'u bilhamdi musalliyan ala Muhammad. He says, I begin with praise, i.e. by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've got to remember, when they're writing poetry, they have a certain weight and a certain rhythm they have to abide by. Hence, you find at times they shorten, or they put words that you may not be too familiar with. It's all to keep that rhythm. So it says, Abda'u bilhamdi. I begin with praise, i.e. praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the same time, after that, musalliyan ala Muhammad, sending salah and salam, peace and salutations upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Who was he? Khayri nabiyyin ursila. Khayr, the best nabi who was sent. Okay. وذي من أقسام الحديث عدة وكل واحد أتى وحده. وذي, i.e. وهذه, and these are different categories of hadith that he's mentioned, and every single one of them, وكل واحد أتى وحده, every single one that's come, I've given you its definition. Okay, so if you look at these first 2 abiyat, or these first 2 lines, it's just an introduction, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending peace and salutations upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then he's telling you what this little manzuma is about, this little piece of poetry. Inshallah, we'll start off with the first one. What I also want you to notice is, look at how every single word here has a meaning to it, and every single word or 2 words is giving you a rule. So imagine, the minute you're able to memorize from here to here, just these 4 lines, and you understand them, you've got the conditions of sahih, what makes a hadith authentic and sound. Anybody ever asks you, how many conditions for hadith to be sahih? Immediately off your head, you know it. You tell this, and this. So he starts off, أولها الصحيح وهو متصل. He says the first type of hadith that I'm going to tell you about, and I'm going to define for you, is what's known as al-hadith al-sahih. Hadith al-sahih is that hadith which is authentic. that hadith which is authentic. What makes a hadith authentic? So he starts off here. I don't know if I have a pen that I can write with. Anyway, he starts off. So أولها الصحيح. What I want you guys to do is just to make notes. I'm not so worried if you understand the Arabic or not, but make notes, summarize them. What's sahih? He gives you the first condition for a hadith to be sahih. وهو ما اتصل إسناده ولم يشذ أو يعل. وهو ما اتصل إسناده. Stop there. That's your first condition. He's saying, in order for a hadith to be considered sahih and authentic, its isnad. Isnad is a chain. Should be connected. What they're talking about when it comes to connectivity. I'll give you an example. And this I'll have to draw for you. One second. One second. One second. As you guys can see my board. So he's talking about sahih. What makes a hadith sahih or authentic? He says, first condition, mattasala isnaduhu, right? The chain is connected. Now, when you look at a hadith, you find that all the hadith start with قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, for example. The Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said. So if you look, let's draw a chain here, okay? Let's say this chain is here. This is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay? And he's the one who told us the hadith. Or, for example, he said that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are judged according to the intention, okay? Who took this hadith from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You find that Umar radiallahu anhu narrates this hadith. So look at how, it's put a U here for Umar. Look at how Umar radiallahu anhu, we all know he met the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They lived at the same time. Umar was one of the greatest Sahaba. And we know that he definitely heard this from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What would happen if one of us, for example, so let's say here's the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and here's 1400 years later, me, for example, okay, I'll put an A. I'm just giving you an example so you can understand. Imagine I just had to say, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam told me, and I jumped generations for 1,400 years. Okay, here we'll say, hold on a second. Where's your chain of narrators? You have to tell us every single person you narrated from. So we want to see, is this chain authentic? Because is this chain joint and authentic? Because how can somebody who lived, for example, 200 years ago say, how can I, for example, say I heard from somebody who lived 200 years ago? It's not possible. I didn't meet them. I have to have heard from somebody else. So same when it comes to this. If I am saying that my sheikh told me that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, my sheikh didn't meet the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's too far. So here we immediately know that this chain of narrators is not connected. There's a disconnect, a big disconnect of so many years. Why I gave you this example is so you can understand where the difference is so big. So even when it comes to this, if you've got here the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you've got Umar radiallahu anhu, who is a Sahabi. Okay, let me rub this out. You got Umar radiallahu anhu, who's a Sahabi. Okay, a Sahabi met the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's fine. The minute you get somebody who is narrating from Umar radiallahu anhu, and he says, I heard Umar radiallahu anhu saying, but this guy is only born in the year 300 Hijri, okay? 300 Hijri, and he's saying, I heard Umar radiallahu anhu say. It's impossible because Umar radiallahu anhu died before 40 Hijri. All the Khulafa had passed away. So that's impossible. So immediately we know there's a break in this chain. So what is he telling you? When it comes to a hadith which is authentic, the first thing we look at is the chain of narrators. That's why if you open Sahih al-Bukhari, for example, you find immediately it starts saying, Haddathana fulan, Haddathana fulan, Haddathana fulan. So that's the chain of narrators before the actual hadith. They're saying, so-and-so told me, that so-and-so told him, that so-and-so told him, that so-and-so told him, until they get to a Sahabi, until they get to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's what makes your isnad authentic, or your isnad connected. where they all joined and it was possible this one met this one met this one. That's the first condition. وهو ما اتصل إسناده, right? Then he says ولم يشذ أو يعل. Okay. Second is the hadith shouldn't be what they call shadh, and it shouldn't have what's called an illah. Now, some scholars say this is one and the same thing. What's an illah? What's something which is shadh? It's to do with a discrepancy. So what discrepancy? For example, there's different types of discrepancies you get. You could get a discrepancy in what's called the matan of the hadith. So the matan is the actual what people attribute to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saying he said this. So for example, if you had a hadith, there's a hadith where it's mentioned that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts those who have to go into the fire, there'll still be space in the fire. Hence, he will then create other people to fill this space. So even though if you look at the isnad, if you look at the chain of narrators, it might all be connected. But there's a discrepancy in this hadith. What's the discrepancy? The fact that it goes against the adl and the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can he punish people who don't deserve to be punished? How can he create people for punishment who've done nothing wrong? So they'll tell you this, there's a discrepancy when it comes to this hadith. As I told you, some of the scholars mentioned that shadh and ma'lul or mu'allal is one and the same. And some go into a little bit more detail to say shadh is to do with the matan of the hadith. And he'll mention all this in detail later on. So the matan is actual what's they attributing to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And illah is to do with the chain of narrators. So at times, what happens? Let's rub this out. I give you an example in our time, and then I give you an example there. What happens sometimes is the chain is connected. The hadith is the matan of the hadith is fine, but you find that those who specialize in hadith, obviously you've got to learn what's called ilmul rijal. You've got to learn the different people who narrate hadith, their names, when they were born, where they lived, what type of person they were, etc., for you to come up with a ruling on these ahadith. So at times what happens is, let's say you all, for example, you're sitting in this gathering, and this is how it was before. The students would come, there would be a sheikh, and he would recite a hadith, or somebody would recite, and they would all have their pens writing, or they were such that they would just memorize every single word that came out one time, first time, and they would memorize. So let's say there's 10 of you, or in this lesson right now, you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 6 of you. And you heard me saying, for example, I'm just giving an example. You heard me saying 1 + 1 is equal to 2. All of you. And then there's one guy who comes and he says, no, I heard him not speaking about 1 + 1. I heard him speaking about 10 + 10. Now, let's look at it logically. Is it possible for 5 people to all say that in this specific gathering, he was speaking about 1 + 1? And one guy who's saying, no, he was actually speaking about 10 + 10. So we can say with certainty that this one guy has gone against the majority of people, and all these people are all authentic. They're all people who are good students, all people who memorized. Hence, we'll say there's a problem there. Another issue, or what may arise, is where you all come to my sitting, okay, my lesson, and when you have your chain of narration, you say that, for example, I heard from my Sheikh Adnan, this, and you record a hadith. Now you have one student from amongst them who says, okay, because he's got so many different mashayikh, he forgets who he heard the hadith from. So instead of saying my name, he says another person, for example. So here, those who follow hadith will say, hold on a second, there's nothing wrong in the matan, but when we come to the chain of narrators, everybody is narrating from Sheikh number 1. Okay? So 10 people are narrating this hadith from Sheikh number 1. And this one guy is narrating it from a different Sheikh altogether. So there's an illah in it. There's something wrong. There's some sort of discrepancy. And again, discrepancies could be major and they could be minor. So when it comes to shadh and ma'lul, you're talking about discrepancies. At times what happens when they speak about shadh, al-hadith al-shadh, they mention that all the people may be good students, they may be people who memorized, etc. So you've got who's called a fiqh, somebody who's trusted. In terms of their deen, they're good. In terms of their character, they're good. In terms of their intelligence and their memorization, they are good. But you find that in the class, there were also people who were excellent and brilliant like them. But there's 10 on one side saying that the Messenger ﷺ, for example, said that a sadaqah is such that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand spent. And you find this one guy who comes and he takes the hadith and he puts it the opposite way. And he says, no, he's saying that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand spent. So we know that this guy has made a mistake. Why won't we say that this hadith is weak? Because all of these people are on a level of dabt and itqan and adl. And those are the next conditions, where the person themselves, or these people, they themselves are good Muslims, respectable Muslims. And in terms of their hifth, their memorization, their preservation of their knowledge, we know that 100% they were good. Getting back to these conditions, so he says, مَتَّصَلْ إِسْنَادُهُ وَلَمْ يَشِذَّ أَوْ يُعَلْ, then says, يَرْوِيهِ عَدْلٌ ضَابِطٌ عَنْ مِثْلِهِ. Fourth condition is the person narrating the hadith should be adl. Adl is somebody whose deen is good. Obviously, this differs from person to person. So you find, and this is with us also, if you just, a lot of these masail, if you just picture it with what happens in our circles, you'll be able to understand it. At times, us guys sitting in this lesson, you may see somebody and one person says, hey, he's a brilliant guy, top guy. And the other guy will say, no, he's all right of a person. And the third guy will say, no, I had a terrible experience with him. You've got 3 different people all judging one person, and they all have different judgments. Hence, when it comes to this person being adl, you find that scholars differ, and this in turn makes them differ when it comes to authenticating a hadith or not. So you find some people will say, hold on, this person is adl, he was a good person, and others will say, no, not really, he wasn't that good. And you find that in this first group of people who say he was brilliant, his hadith is generally stronger. And you find the second group of people who say, he was okay, they grade his hadith to be a little bit lower. And others who say, no, he was terrible, they grade his hadith to be even lower. And why I mention this is you've got to understand these nuances. You have to understand these nuances when it comes to hadith, because what happens a lot of the times, today a student will tell you, this hadith is correct because this sheikh said. There's no harm in doing taqleed of your sheikh when it comes to these masail in hadith and rijal. Okay, this man said, but he could have made a mistake, he could have been wrong, he could have had his own bias. And this is not only when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to your day-to-day life as well. So you've got the first condition, the chain of narrators should be connected. So if this is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is number 1, and you've got Umar radiallahu anhu number 2, and you've got another tabi'i, which is number 3. Number 3 cannot narrate directly from number 1. A tabi'i cannot narrate directly from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he never ever met him. That's why he's called a tabi'i. If he met him, he would have been a sahabi and he would be able to narrate directly. So that's the first condition, is the chain of narrators should be connected. Number 2, it shouldn't be a hadith which is shadh, where you find one person, even though he was a good person, but his riwayah, his narration goes against the majority of the others, and they all good people, strong in their hifth. Number 3, there shouldn't be an illah, and they'll mention this in detail. Number 4, the person narrating the hadith should be adl in terms of his Islam and his religion, and him being practicing should be from the top caliber. And number 5, he should be somebody who is dabit. So dabt refers to a person's memorization and preservation. So memorization, some people, they took the hadith and memorized it in the chest straight away. Others, they wrote down. So if a person narrating hadith, and you find some of the scholars say, no, his hifth, he was weak, and you find that his level of hadith would drop, so he wouldn't be that authentic. And you find that sometimes a person narrating from his book, so you find that this person was sitting in a halaqah of a sheikh, he wrote the hadith, he never memorized everything, but his book has everything, that's why he preserved it. And you find that at times, let's say they find out, or it becomes apparent that towards the end of his life, he made mistakes, or he started to get confused, or he lost his book, for example, then you would find that this guy's level in hadith would go down. But I want you guys to understand, after going through all that, is when you're speaking about a hadith which is authentic or a little bit less than authentic, we've just touched the basics when it comes to this. You then dive deeper, and it's a science on its own, and it requires a lot of time and a lot of specialization. To summarize, for your hadith to be authentic, first look at its sanad, make sure the chain of narrators is connected. Then you look at the hadith itself, it's not shadh, one person is not going against the majority, all who are good. There's no illah, that's generally in the sanad, where this person is narrating from one sheikh, whereas his whole group are narrating from another sheikh. And the person narrating should be adl, a good Muslim, we could translate it as. And the memorization or the preservation of their knowledge, recording of it, should be immaculate, literally. And you find that this is the condition for everybody in the chain. So this person should fulfill this condition, and this person should fulfill it, and this person should fulfill it. So what happens if you've got a hadith, for example, where there's 3 people in it before they get to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if you had to find, for example, that this person here was weak, and you find the whole hadith suffers, so they'll tell you, no, this hadith won't be sahih. So generally, when you're looking at, for example, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, these 2 imams, they, from their conditions to collect a hadith in their book, they went for what was sahih, what was authentic. And inshallah, we'll take later on what's a little bit less than authentic, etc. يرويه عدل ضابط عن مثله معتمد في ضبطه ونقله. Let's finish this for you, and I'll show you where it is in the poem. If you look here, it says أولها الصحيح وهو ما اتصل إسناده، أي وما اتصل إسناده. Right, that's the first condition. The chain should be correct. ولم يشذ, it shouldn't be shadh. أو يعل, it shouldn't have an illah in it, and we'll take that in detail. يرويه عدل ضابط عن مثله. That's condition number 4. Condition number 5, where person narrating, they themselves should be good, trustworthy, upright Muslims, and the hifth should be good. So you find a lot of times they'll say, this person was a good Muslim, but his hifth was weak. And as I mentioned, then the hadith suffers. An mithlihi means every single one of them in the chain of narrators fulfills this condition. Mu'tamadun fi dhabtihi wa naqli is just describing the hifth. Either if it's from their chest, from the memorization, then it's something mu'tamad, it's something that's authentic, and you know that they had top memorization. Or if they're narrating from their book, reading from their book, then you know that all their notes and their records were good. So inshallah, we'll stop there. I know it was a lot to take in, but if you got any questions, I hope this just introduced you to this science and to see how vast it is. Any questions? Well, none of you understood. You understood or you didn't understand? Huh?
We understood.
If you didn't understand, we can repeat tomorrow again. But we'll ask you when you go back, make notes, and come tomorrow. I ask you, what makes a hadith sahih? Explain to me what's adl. Explain to me what's this. Explain to me what's that, etc. Yeah, you were saying?
Sheikh, can you please explain the difference between shadh and illah?
So it's going to come, but there's a difference of opinion when it comes to that. Some say shadh, hadith shadh is speaking about a group of people. Let me draw for you here. Here's the sheikh, for example, okay? This is the sheikh. And this here is student number 1. These are all chains of narrators. And this guy here is student number 2. And this guy here is student number 3. And we'll stop at 4 students. You find that in a halaqah, you have hundreds of students. This guy here is student number 4. I'm going to simplify it for you, okay? So the sheikh tells them, for example, let's put the hadith on the side. Let's say, for example, the sheikh tells them that my car is yellow, okay? Right. My car was yellow. This guy then becomes a sheikh and he has his own students. He has his own 3 students. This guy the same, he has his own 3 students. This guy the same, he has his own 3 students. And this guy number 1, he has his own 3 students, okay? Now they're narrating a story and in it is the sheikh's yellow car. This guy narrating the story, he says that he tells all his students that the sheikh had a yellow car. So tick, it's yellow, yellow, yellow. Why? Because this sheikh narrated it correctly. Then so he also gets a tick. This guy here also narrated it correctly. Okay, so tick, 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 all his students narrated it correctly. This guy here also narrated correctly. All his students narrated correctly. Okay. Now, this guy here goes on to say no. When narrating the story, he says the car was blue. Okay. So immediately, what do we see? Right now, we've only got 4 people, but imagine there were 100 students like that. 99 of them said the car was yellow. And one guy says, no, the car was blue. We immediately know that this guy is making a mistake. It's not possible for 99 people to narrate the same story with the same detail, and this guy goes against it. So what is he? We agree that when he's narrating his hadith, his chain to his sheikh is joined. The first condition is met. We agree that in terms of his hifth, he was good at his memorization. We agree in terms of him being an upright practicing Muslim, he was upright and practicing. Where we got a problem is that we're looking at his hadith, his sanad goes through here, this sanad goes through here, his goes through here. We all know that they got from the same sheikh. Could have been in the same sitting or different sitting. But why did he say the car was blue and these guys said the car was yellow? So they call that shadh. It's something, it's a discrepancy, something that's literally a sore thumb sticking out, literally in our terms. So they won't call him weak. Why? They won't say that this hadith is weak because we're looking at the caliber of the person. If this person was considered to be not a good Muslim, his hadith would go down to weak. If this person was considered to be a good Muslim, but his hifth and his memorization was weak, his hadith would go to weak also. But we're talking about people who generally, the hadith and them being upright Muslims, they were top of the top. So it's possible for them to make a mistake. So instead of saying da'if, they'll say shadh. Why? Somebody who is fiqh, who is trusted, a good Muslim, narrates a hadith, but those who are more fiqh than him and those who are more trusted and more knowledgeable have narrated different to him. And inshallah, when we take some examples of some hadith, you'll see. So that's the concept of shadh. And as for illah, you've got different types of ilal, and generally it's a science such that even from the great scholars, only a few were able to write when it came to this subject, because you have to have a lot of knowledge when it comes to asanid. So you find one of the famous people who wrote in ilal is at-Tirmidhi, ad-Daraqutni, and they say, no, هذا الحديث معلول بسبب كذا وكذا وكذا. He mentions why. And that's generally speaking about the person, the narrators themselves, the mashayikh, the type of hadith they're narrating. It's a science on its own. For now, all you have to know is this hadith doesn't have an illah in it. يرويه عدل ضابط عن مثله. And then we took the next few conditions where these people should be good Muslims whose memorization, etc., is good. So now you've got an idea when we're talking about a hadith which is sahih, what they've actually done to go through these hadith to get what's sahih and muttafaq alayh, etc. Any other question? this we'll take once a week because it's a lot to take in. No more questions with regards to this. If you didn't understand, you must ask me again. We can go over it, but a few, 2, 3, 4 times, you'll go over it and you'll know it, inshallah. Is there anything else I want to take? Yeah, I told you guys that we should have courses. In those courses, we should speak about general improvement and how we can become better people, obviously better Muslims firstly, and better people where we can serve Islam, the Muslims, those around us, our families, the community at large, the world, humanity, everything, every living thing. في كل كبد رطبة أجر. So inshallah, what I thought would be of benefit is to speak about some of these topics that will help us, myself firstly, become better people, and inshallah we're able to benefit others. Looking through the topics, I found that what stands out the most, and those who were there that day, we spoke about mindset, and inshallah today I want to touch on that. We'll start on the topic of mindset. Inshallah we'll go on to different skills when it comes to speaking, when it comes to business, when it comes to a few other things, inshallah. Today I want to speak about mindset. And the topic I want to touch on when it comes to mindset is that of possibility. As Muslims, we believe that everything with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is possible, we're able to attain. And why it's so important to mention this is you find with the world we're living in today, a lot of us, at the slightest difficulty or the smallest setback, people lose hope. People think that, you know what, now this is impossible. It can't happen. Firstly, your belief as a Muslim teaches you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ala kulli shay'in qadir. He has the might and the power and is capable of doing everything. You find somebody who's sick, Allah is able to cure you. You find somebody who's in debt, millions and billions, Allah is able to lift that debt. And you find that Yaqub alayhi salam, for example, he loses his son Yusuf alayhi salam. He loses Binyamin, the third brother after Binyamin is taken. He also doesn't want to go back. And it's years and years. He cries and he weeps and he's sad. And even after all that, you find he tells his children, he says, "La tayasu min rawhillah." Don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, you find a lot of people, self-help coaches, etc., they're always teaching this. And we start off from the Islamic concept to say that everything is possible. Hence, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you put your mind to something and you put in the effort, bi'idhnillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant you. Allah doesn't oppress anybody in any way. You find a lot of times people tell you, oh, I'm weak, I can't memorize the Quran. Oh, but somebody else did it. No, they better than me. Or Allah gave them, and astaghfirullah, saying He didn't give me. No, the fact that Allah showed you that this person can do this, you must be able to train your mind, and you must be able to believe that Allah informed me that He's able to grant me. Allah informed me that He's able to do everything. Allah informed me that He granted Zakaria alayhi salam, for example, a son even in his old age, granted Ibrahim alayhi salam a child in his old age, etc. What's that showing me? That shows me that as a Muslim, my default should be that bi'idhnillah, with the permission and the strength of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every single thing is attainable. And people differ when it comes to this. You find those who will sit back and they fall into depression. Why? Due to the slightest setback. That shouldn't be who we are. That's why if you look at the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and you look at his message, when he first came with his message, he was rejected by many people, and he was rejected by the top notch, the top people in Quraysh. He didn't sit back and weep or stay in his house. No, he carried on making an effort, obviously with the guidance and under the permission and instruction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He goes out to At-Ta'if, and you find instead of the people even showing him a little bit more mercy and compassion, they are even worse to him. He doesn't lose hope. He doesn't stop and say that, you know what, it's impossible now. No. He carries on going. So much so it's mentioned in the hadith that when it came to the Mawsim, when it came to Hajj, and as you know, that Hajj, even the people of Jahiliyyah used to go for Hajj. They had their own version of Hajj. They say in this Mawsim, he would go out and he would call the people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very few people accepted at the beginning, but obviously by making dua and being steadfast and practicing and putting in that effort and having hope for his people. So the people of Ta'if, after they abused and insulted him, he still had hope for the generations which were to come. He had hope, and his wish was for everybody to accept Islam. And we as Muslims, we take from that, even if you're going through difficulty, you're going through setback, don't let your positivity as well as your mindset go down. Yes, it's normal to feel sad at times. It's normal to feel down. It can happen, but don't live in that rut. Go back to positivity, go back to obviously believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, go back to understanding that whatever happens to you in life is from Allah and it's good for you. If it's a bounty, you're grateful, and that's good for a believer. And if it's a calamity, you're patient, and that's also good for a believer. So if there's anything I could give you guys today, is the importance of believing that every single thing is possible. Bi-idhnillah. You have dreams tomorrow, you want to teach others, you want to learn Arabic, you want to build an orphanage, you want to have a school. It's possible. Don't listen to those people who said it's not possible. Allah will open for you. You put the effort, you take the first step, and you'll find doors opening in miraculous ways. Obviously, be somebody who's steadfast, who's practicing, who's helping others wherever you're able to give sadaqah, and dua is the weapon of a believer. Call out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, cry out to him, especially in the times where dua is closer to being accepted, the last third of the night, especially. And you find Allah will give you. We ask Allah to grant us goodness, beneficial knowledge, and make us from those who are always upbeat, always optimistic, and always positive. Ameen. Any questions? Anybody wants to ask anything? Oh, enough for today.